Good afternoon. I'm hoping that the lighting is okay in here. So I've been extraordinarily busy lately, doing a lot of hauling hay, hauling lime, hauling compost, and paying bills, big bills, huge bills, and purchasing new or this year's inputs. Everybody's got to purchase this year's inputs at some point, whether you've done it last fall, if you were fortunate enough to have all your bills paid last fall. I was not. It bled over into this year, but I have got my bills paid now. So right now I'm I still have about 23 to 25,000 bushels of corn, so just call it 24,000 bushels of corn in the bin. And I'm getting ready to sell that. Right now, corn is at $7.70 a bushel. Yeah, $7.70. They're 30 cents under basis now, I think, over the place that I normally take it, which I'm perfectly happy with that price. But it's time that I start moving corn, and I'm gonna need to clone myself because there's just not enough of me to go around. But yeah, so buying this year's inputs. I didn't want to spend more money last year and then, I didn't want to spend more money last year and then not have anything to spend this coming year because of taxes and everything else. If it's got 2021 on the side, on the invoice, it has to be declared in 2021, and it is now 2022. So finished paying off all of last year's debt, and I am sick and tired of paying these debts. Just sick and tired of it. It's ridiculous. So a few months ago, there was a fellow that said, "Hey, have you seen this guy, John Stevens, Maple Grove Farms?" And I was like, I think I might have saw him on there. And there's a lot of people that suggest a lot of videos that I should be watching, but they started talking about regenerative agriculture. I'm like, well, you can't pull something from nothing, okay? And it's like, well, how do you get something from nothing? Where does it come from? Where's it been? Why, if it's there, why isn't it on a soil test? And all that jazz. So I go and I look at John Stevens, and I'm like, wow, this guy's pretty funny. He's right to the point. And I loved it when they were talking about Cole the Corn Star and his vial of dirt. Now, I have nothing against Cole. He's a young guy. He's trying to make his way in the world. And just like any other young guy, you tell him this is how it's to be, and that's how it's to be, and you expand on how it's to be. But when you get to my age, and I'm going to be 50 in July, you start to think about, is this really how it has to be? Is this really the way it is going to be for farmers from now on, or from, let's just say 1980, 82, 83, till now? We've had extreme lows and we've had extreme highs. But in the last probably 15 years, there has really not been any super lows. I mean, input costs have always and seem to have mimicked the market prices. And if you were savvy enough and had enough storage, you could sell off enough to pay your debt, your loans, and then you would, have the remainder to buy your input costs and, for the next year. And you thought you were doing well, but then something broke, and before you know it, you've got no more money, and you're like, damn it, where did this go? Well, I've watched a lot of YouTube farmers spend a shit ton of money. And in today's climate, the rug could be pulled out from under everybody's feet in the blink of an eye. So, and that's really what has happened, because Roundup 2 years ago, when I bought, 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I bought that tote of Roundup. It was $8.25 a gallon. Today, you're lucky to get it for 60, delivered, 60. And that tote was 220 gallons. The new tote is 270 gallons. So that puts you somewhere around $16,000, $17,000. Well, damn it, that's a lot of money. I mean, last year to grow 300 acres of corn, 300 acres of corn and 3,400 acres of hay, I only had like $21,000 in chemical costs. The rest was fertilizer, and that was $250,000. So fertilizer at $250,000 to grow 3,300 acres of hay, about 3,300 acres of hay, and maybe it was 35, well, whatever. Let's just round up numbers, 300 and 3,500. So 300 acres of corn, 310, and say 3,500 acres of hay. $250,000 in fertilizer. The problem with that is that equipment is very expensive now. Tires are super expensive. Parts are insanely expensive. And now fertilizer went from $332 or $338 a ton to $675 the last I was quoted, and that was on Monday. So I'm sure it has gone up due to world events. So that kind of gets like, holy cow, what are we going to do here? So back to John Stephens and his regenerative ag. So a lot of people probably looked at John Stephens' videos and like, oh, that guy's an idiot. He's going to run his ground into his ground out. And I have said this as well. We have had people that come in and mine out the soil. It's true. You can mine out the soil. Or is it true that you can mine out the soil? So let's go back to a soil test. When you take your probe and you stick it down into the soil profile, they want you to take like the top 6 inches of dirt, of soil, and that's where all of your nutrient value is, in that top 6 inches, right? That's what I was taught pretty much my entire life, that anything below that doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So, you know, of course, you're farming the top 6 inches of the soil because everything below that is pretty much topsoil anyway, or subsoil anyway, and there's no nutrient value down there whatsoever. So I'm interested in what John has to say, and he threw a couple of names out, and I started listening to these people, and there's a couple of guys like Gabe Brown who have been doing this. My favorite is actually David Brandt. David Brandt is a guy that's my dad's age. He went to Vietnam, came back, and you can watch his story. And he has, for the last 2 years, he has been farming regenerative agriculture-wise. Really, I think for the first 45 years of his life, he didn't even realize he was doing it. He was just taking different plants through cover crops and utilizing their capability, what he thought their capability, to break down nutrients in the soil. But when you pull a soil test and you're looking at it and you're like, well, there's my phosphate levels are not great, my potash levels are not great, my nitrogen is in the gutter, and there's barely any zinc, and the sulfur is gone because there's nothing coming from the diesel fuel, you know, that we cleaned up a bunch of years ago, coal and diesel fired plants. Where the hell is this stuff coming from? And my soil test says it's not there. It's just not there. Well, recently, within about 2 months, I took a soil test and I sent it to my fertilizer plant. Like, hey, can I have some soil test bags? I'm like, sure, how many do you want? It's like, give me 100. You know, that would be $1,300 worth of soil testing. And I've got all these bags, and I started pulling these samples, and I think I pulled, I don't know how many samples I pulled. Maybe there was 15 samples across 15 different fields. And I was expecting to see something very, very different than what I actually saw. And I was very disappointed because I spent $250,000 in fertilizer. And not just nitrogen. Out of that $250,000, $100,000 of it was for a complete blend with sulfur and boron. You know, and I'm like, what in the hell is going on that I'm unable to see this in my soil test? There's no way that the corn pulled all these nutrients out, and there's no way that the hay has pulled everything out. So I decide, well, there's something fucked up, you know, excuse my language, but there's something not right here. So I start diving into the depths of the YouTube world. Like, okay, what's out here that can explain this? Because if I call the fertilizer plant, you know what they're going to tell me? Well, you grew a good crop, but your calcium levels are low, and that's why your calcium levels are low, and blah, blah, blah. You need to put lime, and that's what I got, lime, you know? So I've been hauling lime home. I'm like, man, I got to haul lime home. And I'm looking at these, listening to YouTube podcasts, and I'm YouTube podcasts from the Understanding Ag and all these guys. And then I find a couple of female scientists. One is from Australia, and Christine Johnson or Jones or whatever her name is. Anyway, she is brilliant, just brilliant. And she breaks it down in layman's terms as to what and why I can't see all this nutrient, this synthetic nutrient that I put on to my soil. So last year I brought a bunch of compost home, and the year before I brought a bunch of compost home. And I kind of figured the year before, oh, I took all this compost home and, you know, I put that on there, and I grew the corn, but then I chopped all the corn stalks off of these properties. That must be where my nutrients went. They're gone. So this year I pulled those soil tests again, and on the same fields, and all that organic trash or that residue is all there, and the roots aren't pulled up, the balls are still there. The soil looks a little different than it did the year before. It's a little deeper in color because my bucket of dirt was downstairs. The bucket's, you know, put in a bucket, it's downstairs. So and it was a little bit darker, and I thought, well, that indicates organic matter. Well, when I got my soil tests back, of course, my organic matter had risen, but there's nothing in it. So watching and listening and understanding where it went was, I put on a non-organic form of phosphate, potassium, sulfur, obviously boron. What else was in there? It doesn't even matter. The compost that I put on there was a biostimulant, okay? It was a biostimulant, plus my secret sauce. My secret sauce definitely is a biostimulant. That makes wakes them up, causes them to multiply and turn into carbon and residue eating machines. All right? So, and you do have to have balance, by the way, you really do. But, so these tests that we've been taking and sending up to the fertilizer plants, and they've been giving us recommendations, are for non-organic nutrients. Well, when I took and I put my stimulants down, my biostimulants down, woke those up, they ate the synthetic or the non-organic. They broke it down, made it available to the plant, and put it back in the soil as organic nutrient, which is more available to the plants. As a matter of fact, it is available to the plants. Now, that organic matter is not per se 100. It's 100% available. So it's like, well, what are you going to do here? I got to spend, because the cost of fertilizer isn't $400 and $40 a ton for that blend. It is now $980 for that blend, and continuing to go up. So a couple of years ago, like 2020, I planted corn on this farm, which I know to have a fair bit more organic matter than the other farm by 2%. And I was like very surprised, extraordinarily surprised, that I didn't put any phosphate down, and the potash that I put down was basically a mute subject, because it takes a little bit of time for the microorganisms in the soil to break that synthetic down to make it available to the plants. But I had good corn, 175 bushels to the acre. Didn't put a super load of nitrogen on. I actually backed off the nitrogen here because I had put all of this compost on, which has nitrogen in it. Not a lot, but enough. In the 5-ton range, it was beautiful. Beautiful corn. No shortages on anything. No purple leaves, no yellowing leaves. You saw the videos. It was great. But this year, I put on the recommended amount of commercial fertilizer, and I saw zero response. It did nothing. Nothing spectacular happened. I was like, what the hell is going on? And even over on the other property where I put corn again, I had, and I'll tell you, my experiment, and I expected to get like 500 bushels to the acre. I had zero response between 660 pounds and 1,320 pounds. I took a 9-acre field and I had some fertilizer left over in the buggy, and I went over that field twice and I saw very little. The only thing that happened there was because there was more nitrogen. I had the corn going down. It was, the stalk strength was pretty ridiculous. And you probably saw that. That was 2020. So what's going on? Pulled the soil tests on that. Where did that 1,320 pounds of blend go? The stalks are all there. They're all there. Where did they go? I put compost on it. Where did that nutrient go? And that compost, by the way, if I put 5 tons of that compost on there, the amount of inorganic phosphate and potassium. Now, inorganic, you got to remember this, inorganic phosphate and potassium is more than enough to grow a 200 bushel yield of corn. Well, what about all the organic nutrient that's in there? You know, because the tests that I sent out and the tests that everybody else sent out, and I've got 5 different tests back that I've averaged, and if I do 5 tons to the acre, there should be more than enough to do 200 to 225 bushels of corn with 130 units of nitrogen, applied nitrogen. But it's not in the ground. Well, the soil test you send up to the fertilizer plant, they just want to sell you fertilizer. It's like watching a politician, you know. Hey, you know, this, and this, and that, and that, and he did that, and he did that, and he did the other thing. Well, that's exactly what your fertilizer plant's doing. You need this, and this, because that soil is that, and that, and there's nothing going to be there. And if you don't do this, you're going to have a crop failure. So I'm going to do some things that kind of rock the ag world, and that is, I'm going to put 150 units of nitrogen on my corn. And I'm going to put probably only 2 to 3 tons of, probably only 2 tons of compost to the acre to grow 600 acres of corn. And I'm going to put my stimulant, the compost is a biostimulant. As a matter of fact, it is a bioinfusion. Mycorrhizo fungus is in there. There's about 50 million trillion gazillion different types of amoebas and nematodes and all these things that need to be in the soil to break down that inorganic and organic nutrient. So when you go out and you put your 620, I think I put 620 pounds of 12, 24, 24 on. 620 pounds of 12, 24, 24. 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72. 72 units of nitrogen in that blend. And I put in a further 175 units of 32% on there. And there you go. I'm like 250 units of nitrogen. And, you know, of course, the corn looked great as far as nitrogen. I had no lack of nitrogen, but I didn't count any of the compost that I had put on. So this coming year, it's getting 150 units of nitrogen and 0 P and K and any other elements. What I am putting on and what needs to be put on is lime. I got to put lime on because the microbial activity in the soil, once it gets below 6.5, 6.4, your microbial activity decreases, okay? Now, I had calcium and I had lime in my compost, and my pHs didn't move, but the organic matter in that soil rose by 1%. 1% in 2 years is pretty incredible by doing it this way with such a low amount of pH. pH stands for potential hydrogen in your soil, and you need it to be somewhere around 6.8, 7, 6.7, 6.8, 6.9, 7 pH is optimal for microbial activity. Get over that, it just goes the other way. So I'm going to be putting this lime on as many acres as I can get it on, and I'm not going to be putting it on in stupid numbers or stupid amounts, because as I go into the regenerative program with cover crops and cover crops and cover crops, the mycorrhizome that will be in the soil and continually being fed by the cover crops that are pulling the energy from the sun, because microactivity, microbiology beneath your feet, it needs carbon. It is a carbon monster. And for 0.04% of this stuff we call air, and your plants need that to survive, well, your plants convert carbon to oxygen by photosynthesis, pulling that carbon into the ground, feeding the microbiology beneath our feet, which breaks down inorganic nutrients. And that is it in a nutshell. There is enough inorganic nutrition in our soil, not 6 inches deep, but as deep as that rock will go, right down to lava. It's there. Now, you'd be a fool to think that it wasn't. If you think that it isn't there, there is testing that you can do. Go to the Kellogg's, Kellogg's cereal, Kellogg company. They have a whole page on what they are doing with Gabe Brown and the testing. And on average of, I think he said 75 farms that they did, but there's many, many different farms that they did. 9,000 pounds of nitrogen in the soil. It's unavailable to your plants. It has to be made available by the photosynthesis and the carbon and feeding the microbiology through fungus, beneficial funguses, and beneficial everything from insects right on down. It is there. I will be doing this. I am not giving the fertilizer plant $250,000 this year. I'm not going to do it. I will be putting my secret sauce on my hay, because I know that that is a biostimulant and it will cause the microbes in the soil to fire up, break down the root mass, the dead roots, and the lime, and my hay will produce hay without me putting any nitrogen on. What will be, will be. Bahala na on that one, because if I put if I put nitrogen fertilizer on my hay crop, and these mushroom growers, or even beef and dairy and horse people don't pay their bill, I'm just taking this check here that I received from them, I'm putting it in this hand, and I'm handing it over to a fertilizer company or some other thing, And I'm really getting tired of this. So I'm not doing this on a small scale. I'm doing it on a large scale. I'm going to be growing 400 acres of soybeans and 600 acres of corn. I will be putting no phosphate and no potassium whatsoever on those fields. I will only be putting nitrogen on the corn, and in between I will be rotating. Multi-species between wheat and corn, a single species between corn and soybeans. Soybeans goes directly into wheat. From wheat, it goes into a 12-way mix that will be selected through myself, an agronomist, and a seed company that will put the stuff into the soil, the carbon into the soil. It will break through hard pan without putting a plow in it. Oh yeah, by the way, this will be 100% no-till from now on. The only thing I'm going to run the disc over is where I used the ripper. And there's like 2 more fields that I need to run a ripper on, in a small scale, and I'm going to do that this spring just to break up that compaction so that I have little variations in the yield. It's not by much. There's just a couple of wet spots that need to be dried out a bit. And I will not be running a disc over that. I'm just gonna no-till it because it's such a small area. And then if somebody wants a ripper, I will sell them the ripper and they can be happy with it. I got all brand new points, 2 sets of them in there, and I got a bunch of shear bolts. I will be selling the ripper. I'm probably gonna sell my disc, and I'm gonna sell 2 moldboard plows. I have 100% confidence that this is going to work. And the reason I have 100% confidence that this is going to work is very simple. I did a farm last year. It's just a little ways away, like up the road a mile, not even a mile, 3/4 of a mile. And it's shit ground. Everybody said that shit ground, don't bother, you'll lose your shirt in there, it's wet, it's nothing but clay. I went in there last year and I put compost on one field. That's all I could get on there. I put no compost on the other field, the big 50, 60 acre field, and I put the same fertilizer rate between the field on the left as I did the field on the right. I did put my biostimulant on, that liquid sunshine that I have, and I saw no difference. It made no difference in any of those fields, what I did, other than I put that biostimulant in that soil to excite the microbes that have just been sitting there waiting for an oxygen infusion, which was the dumbest thing I did. If I just no-tilled it, and if I'd have no-tilled that, put my biostimulants on, both the compost and my secret sauce, and went ahead and went, I guarantee you that I would have had the same result, because there was a field that I couldn't disc and plow because of garbage in the field. It was an old pasture, it was a bunch of shit, and I just ran that corn planter right through it. There was old trees growing in it that I had, what did I do? I ran them over with the mower. I had hay in there, and I just cut those off with the mower because they were just these little 1-inch saplings and they needed to go. You could not tell the difference between that and where I had plowed it and worked it under. But this coming year, because I destroyed the structure of the soil at 8-inch depth, I can pretty well tell you that I'm gonna notice a difference this year. That's why I'm going to put my compost on the whole entire field, the whole entire farm. I'm gonna be using my secret sauce as well. And we're going into intense rotational crop rotation with cover crops, and that's how it's gonna be. But anyways, I'm sorry if I bored you all in this thing. You can sit back and watch me on this path that I am upon. I know it'll work because I've done it in the past, just didn't realize what I was doing and then stopped halfway through, or 1/4 of the way through, or 1/5 of the way through, and I just was like, well, I'm going back to tillage, here we go. And that's what we did. So this coming year, nope, not looking back. There's gonna be a 635 disc harrow for sale. There's gonna be chisel plow for sale. There's gonna be moldboard plows for sale, a ripper for sale. I'm going to sell my tillage equipment because I don't wanna ever hook up to it again. Not that I dislike tillage, I love tillage. Oh, there's a color mulcher that I can sell. There's a lot of things I'm gonna sell. You name it, I'm selling it. I'm rebuilding the grain drill. The corn planter is gonna get a smooth, not a coulter, but a cutting disc in front where I will cut a slot about 3 to 4 inches deep with the in front of the corn row to get through this grass that's out there, because I'm going to let my hay get up about that high before I terminate it. Yep, I may let it get up about that high before I terminate it. You know, maybe mid-May. Terminate that in mid-May. Everybody's gonna be like, oh my God, Pandy's lost his fucking mind. Yep, boom, I did. I hope you enjoyed this.